Hello, hello, and welcome to part 2 of Isolated Waters. I'm actually recording this the day after I did the first one because, well, despite being out of breath earlier in the day, my lungs are pretty much back to a safe-ish capacity. And, yeah. I don't know if this will be going up, tomorrow, Saturday or not, or if I'll save this for, a rainy day or something. But, yeah, we're gonna just start reading and go for an hour like usual. And then, yeah. This is totally not related to the fact that when I was listening to this earlier, I was like, wait, I don't want it to stop. Oh, right, I only recorded an hour last night. Anyway. Alright, so picking up where we left off. School had finally let out for the day, and for once Emiko was more than ready to leave. Usually, she preferred to stay behind and assist in reordering the classroom, cleaning up, and other such duties that would befit a class president. Today, however, after the day she'd had, Emiko just wanted to get out of there for once. With a rough slam of her locker door, the brunette turned towards the exit, only to find her way blocked by Amanda Jenkins and her little posse. Emiko just sighed. If there was going to be a fight, she was more than ready and capable, but she really did not want to have to deal with that platinum blonde bitch's attitude anymore. Going somewhere, Ayame? She asked, stepping towards Emiko, her right arm in a splint. Nurse says I got a broken wrist now. So thanks for that. Is that all? Asked Emiko calmly. Because if you're quite through, I have far more important things to worry about than your little boo-boos. Hey, you can't talk to her like that, snapped one of Amanda's clique. Emiko just laughed. I will talk to her with the same level of respect she shows to me, she replied, letting just a hint of royal snobbery come through. If she wishes to engage me in conversation like a normal person, I will gladly reciprocate. Up until now, I have only heard the gruntings of a Neanderthal coming from her mouth. Faster than even Emiko's... Bleh. Screw you, Java. Faster than even Emiko's trained senses could detect, Amanda's good hand pulled back and smacked Emiko roughly across the face. Immediately, though, the transfer student regretted her decision, as the impact of her hand on Emiko's face nearly broke her other wrist and sent her back onto her butt. By now, Emiko had definitely had just about enough of this girl, and so decided it was time to put her in her place. The illusion she cooked up was a simple one, but it worked. Amanda's cohorts saw her stand up, spit in Emmy's face, and before turning and leaving, and so they followed suit, not knowing the real Amanda was still in the hall, kneeling now, and clutching her pained wrist against her body. What? Where are you going? She cried out, but they couldn't hear her. A noise filled Amanda's ears then. Behind her, she could hear a deep breathing. Don't turn around, came a deep, somewhat familiar voice, but know this much, human. If I chose to, I could snap your spine like a twig and pick my teeth with your finger bones. The only thing keeping me from doing so right now is a promise I made. A promise I am more than willing to break if you give me an excuse to do so. A blue, clawed hand rested itself on the American's shoulder, and her wide, terror-filled eyes glanced over to behold it. "Oh, and one last thing. Don't bother telling anyone about this. After all, who would even believe you? Now, run along, senpai." The hand and the deep breathing both vanished, and after about a minute in which she collected her thoughts, Amanda took off, oh, typo, towards the doors like a wiener dog with its butt on fire. From that day forward, Emiko doubted she'd have much issue with the girl, and though it wasn't like she'd actually go through with any of the things she'd threatened her with, damn, it had felt good. The walk home was always an enjoyable one, as it took Emiko by the botanical gardens. Though at this time of year, the flowers had yet to bloom, in only a matter of weeks the area would be bright and colorful, as thousands of seasonal blossoms would unfurl and show their petals to the world. Emiko hoped Usoko would be back by then, so they could share the experience together. Oh, Usoko. Emiko pondered where her girlfriend likely was right now. Probably somewhere over the Pacific. Possibly nearing Hawaii at this point. She hoped the flight wasn't too terrible, and Emiko once again felt more than a bit grumpy that she hadn't been permitted to accompany Usoko on this important trip. No distractions, they had both been told when the issue had been addressed. It was then that Emiko was sure she saw a familiar figure in the distance. Narrowing her eyes, she was absolutely certain she could make out Rei Kobayashi coming her way, accompanied by someone Emiko didn't recognize. She looked like someone deep into Garu culture, though. "Hey, Rei!" called Emiko, waving her arm towards the girl. Rei smiled, turning to the woman with her and saying something, before barreling towards Emiko at high speed, the blue Oni only barely having enough time to brace as Rei scooped her into a bear hug. "Emichi!" she cheered, squeezing her counterpart. "Like, OMG! It's so good to see you!" "Likewise, Rei," grunted Emmy, as even she found herself powerless in the grip of Rei's embrace. "Who's your friend? Gonna introduce us?" Rei set Emmy back down, the latter straightening her uniform back out as the tanned woman approached. "Right, Hitomi, this is my friend, Emiko, the one I told you about earlier." "Oh, hey, nice to meet you," said Hitomi, a hand on her hip. "Won't lie, and no offense, but I expected you to be bigger. Anyway, Hitomi Nakadai." "Emiko Ayame, charmed," replied Emiko cordially. Hitomi covered her mouth with her hand, whispering, "Hey, don't worry. Rei let me in on the secret." "Oh, did she now?" mumbled Emmy, glancing over at Rei. Sorry. Speaking of the Red Oni, her keen senses had picked up an awful stench, and even Emiko was smelling it now. Sickly sweet, but also like an open sewer, and it was getting stronger by the second. What is that?" gagged Hitomi, pinching her. Oh, sorry. What is that?" gagged Hitomi, pinching her nose. "Did one of you... Wait, what the hell is that?" Shambling towards them, coming from some nearby brush, was what could only be described as a zombie. Rotting gray-green skin clung to it like modeling clay pressed onto chicken bones, with some chunks missing or otherwise falling off it. There was no head on its shoulders, opting instead to carry it in some sort of makeshift basket made from a long cloth in one hand. The faintly ruddy-colored hair on that head was matted, stringy and long, caked in dirt, blood, and other things the girls cared not to identify. and fortunately covering most of the thing's face. As it got closer, it began vocalizing a single word from its neck stump, oddly enunciated despite the lack of lips, or a larynx, or really any sort of neck at all. Rei didn't need to wait and see how it played out. She looked over her shoulder at Hitomi, shouting for her to run. Hitomi did just that, getting a safe distance away, but refused to let Rei out of her sight. "Emmy, you're a lot better at illusions," said Rei, taking up position next to Emiko. "Mind setting one up so we can deal with this thing?" "Already done," responded Emmy, transforming to Oni form as Rei did the same. They made for an imposing duo, red and blue Oni side by side, one licked with flame, the other crackling with electricity. In only seconds, however, both girls would be laying in craters on the ground, as somehow this rotting thing managed to overpower them both, using its free arm to pound them into the ground, one after the other. It then lumbered over to Emiko, kneeling next to the fallen princess. Okay, I gotta do a little liquid trick here. It gurgle hissed from its neck stump. It seemed to seize up then, as if racked by pain. Hitomi had hit the thing with a taser, giving the girls the chance they needed to run. "Friend of yours?" called Rei, both girls now in human form again. "Seemed like she knew your name." "So it would seem," replied Emiko as the trio rushed around the corner and into the botanical gardens. "Never seen it before in my life, though. Any clue what it was?" "Duh, a zombie," chided Hitomi, clinging to Rei's back. "And you're welcome for the help." Figuring they'd put enough distance between them, Emiko stopped for a second to catch her breath. "No, zombies aren't real," she explained, though the words rang hollow in her mind, considering all she'd seen lately. "That was something else. It's a shame Nonami isn't here. She'd certainly know for sure." The smell started to manifest again, and the girls got back on their feet and bolted. "We can get to HQ through the gardens," yelled Emiko. "And who knows, we may even be able to throw this thing off our scent. Follow me." The botanical gardens were large, and they contained many twists and turns that Emiko hoped would throw their pursuer off the trail. Unfortunately, it seemed to have a supernatural sense of direction, able to track them down quickly, cutting them off at times as they rounded corners. Sorry for the weird pauses. Eventually, they came to the back entrance, and their only possible escape route, a large, barred gate, currently locked. "How are we gonna get out now?" moaned Hitomi. "Shit, we're trapped. Unless I suppose one of you has a key?" Rei shrugged, gripping either end of the gate, and in one swift motion wrenched it free and tossed it aside. "There's your key," she grinned. "Come on, I can see HQ from here." Running faster than they'd had in a while, neither girl stopped moving until they were safely within the walls of Ayanami Industries. "Wah!" cried Aru, as the two Oni nearly crashed into him as they rushed through the doors. What's going on? Are you being chased?" "Human!" Hitomi, dazed, had crawled off of Rei's back and slid into a desk chair. "Whee!" she spluttered, spitting slowly in the seat before passing out. Oh. "We are, and there's more important things to worry about," snapped Emmy. "Some sort of walking corpse is heading this way. It was strong enough to knock both Kobayashi and I off our feet with one arm." Aru was about to make a smart-ass remark when he noticed the shambling figure outside. Pale and listless, it shuffled by, peering around as though searching for something. as if following a scent. Fortunately for the girls, and likely Aru as well, Gardena HQ had a special illusion around it that dulled the perception of anyone not wearing a yokai crystal. People would still see it and knew it was there, but if you were near the main entrance and happened to see, say, a boy with a monkey tail or large ogres in the main lobby, your brain would not even acknowledge it. Finally, after what had felt like an eternity, the thing seemed to give up and, to everyone present's surprise, faded into a gray mist which quickly vanished from view. "What the hell was that?" breathed the ape boy. "That's what we want to know," replied Emmy, still shaken by the experience. There had been a twinge of familiarity there. Some vague aspect of that thing was known to her, but the princess just couldn't place it. Well, there would certainly be time enough to figure it out, as both Ray and Emmy were going to pore over the archives until they found something, even if it took all night. "Come on, Ray," grunted Emiko, motioning to the red Oni. "Grab your girlfriend and bring her with. We'll need all the help we can get." "What? We're not dating!" exclaimed Ray, already hefting Hitomi onto her back, adding quietly, "Yet."
Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll look out your windows, you'll see the city of Los Angeles directly below us. We'll be pulling into LAX shortly. Please wait until the fasten seatbelt light has turned off, and thank you for flying with us.
About halfway through the pilot's spiel, Usoko had woken up, incredibly groggy. She had a hard time sleeping in chairs, even ones that reclined all the way back like these. As such, her whole body was stiff, and her dreams, when she had dreamt, were a jumbled mess of images and sounds, and she had a weird taste in her mouth. She slid open the window screen — she had closed it before she'd fallen asleep earlier — and looked down. It was 9 p.m., and the ground below the plane was brightly illuminated. She could just barely make out the tens of thousands of cars that traveled the streets below, as street lights illuminated the highways, making them resemble orange rivers. The city itself was like a beacon of radiance in the nighttime sky. The skyscrapers of the downtown district resembled crystal spires. Just off in the distance, Usoko could even see the famous Hollywood sign. It felt weird being back home, as her family had once lived in one of the nicer neighborhoods in LA, though Usoko could barely remember its name anymore. For the first 5 years or so of her life, she'd lived here, gone to preschool and kindergarten. Back then, it seemed like nothing could ever go wrong. The world was such a peaceful place, or at least seemed that way to the young and innocent Pinkette. With a faint smile, Usoko poked Elizabeth, who had also been asleep in the seat next to her. The Dampier had drifted off shortly after takeoff, and had only woken up once to use the bathroom. Usoko guessed she really needed her sleep. "Hey, we're just about there," whispered Usoko. "Might want to start waking up." "I know, Takibana," she mumble-whispered back, never once opening her eyes. "I heard every word. My eyes might be shut, but I've not been sleeping. I've trained myself beyond the need for such things." "Then why were you snoring earlier?" Let me try that read again. "Then why were you snoring earlier?" "I'm going to feed you your own gallbladder if you ask any more such questions," she growled, stretching out her body with a grunt. "Now then, you said someone was going to be picking us up, correct?" "Who was it again?" "My old friend, Sophie. We reconnected a few years back, and we talk almost every day," grinned Usoko, her eyes sparkling. "Her older sister is going to pick us up. Just, try and be normal, will ya?" Elizabeth shifted in her seat a bit before readjusting the recline and sitting back up, buckling in. Seeing this, Usako remembered she needed to do the same, and did. If by normal you mean don't threaten to eat the jugulars, I make no promises. Seeing the expression on Usako's face, she added, Yes, I'll be on good behavior, Takibana. I know my backstory for this. Have it memorized. Elizabeth seemed to wince when speaking the final word aloud. Senpai. When the plane landed, the girls' disembarkment went smoothly. As they were getting off the plane, Usako briefly noticed that same black-haired girl from before, with the thick-lensed glasses, and who she knew she recognized from somewhere, struggling once more with her large suitcase. This time it was stuck in the overhead bins, and this girl, not even 5 foot tall, couldn't quite reach. Figuring she could at least offer the girl a hand, Usako approached her and laid a hand on the case. Hey, want some help? She offered. The odd girl, apparently a bit panicked by Usako's appearance, began clutching her necklace. No, that's okay, she stammered, her words running into one another. You're a lot busier than me. Don't worry, I'll manage. Thanks, thank you. Anyway, Usako just shrugged, shifting her travel bag on her back and headed up the breezeway to catch up with Elizabeth. It didn't take them long to gather their bags. The two had traveled as light as possible, after all. Once they had been retrieved, they began making their way to the pickup zone where 2 blonde girls seemed to be waiting. The shorter, if only barely, of the two, jumping with glee. Usako! She cheered, taking off into a sprint and wrapping her arms around the pinkette, who returned the gesture with an equal amount of enthusiasm. I'm just so happy to see you! I could burst! Wait, I got that wrong. I'm so happy to see you! I could just burst! I'm really happy to see you too, Soph, smiled Usako. Wow, you got really tall. No fair. Yeah, grinned Sophie Myers, glancing first at her sister Lyra, then to Elizabeth. We were kind of hoping you brought Kuriko too. Who's your friend? Oh, that's Mina, interrupted Elizabeth, giving them her false identity's name. Mina Belmont. Oh, Belmont, huh? Chuckled Lyra, winking. Any relation to Simon? Elizabeth just grumbled a threat under her breath as she began loading her single suitcase into the back of Lydia's old VW party van. Kept in immaculate condition, if muddy like a crocodile, it was a clearly well-loved vehicle that Lyra herself had been taking care of for a very long time. It was then that Elizabeth noticed the bracelet Lyra wore on her ankle. It contained a single, faintly glowing green gem. The average person would have missed it, but Elizabeth could tell even at a glance that it was a yokai crystal. Let me guess, she whispered in Lyra's ear. Hoppy. Lyra's eyes sprang open, wide as dinner plates. What do you mean? She stammered, trying to regain her calm. What's a harp? Elizabeth just chortled. Don't worry, you're in good company, she replied, quickly baring her fangs. Usako just didn't tell me you all were like us. Why don't we discuss this more once we're on the road? Said Lyra, her voice a bit more relaxed. More privacy that way. Climbing into the van, Usako could tell it had been pretty heavily modified. The middle bench seat had been removed, replaced with a table, while the seat had been turned 180 degrees, so it now faced said table. There was a large window that almost resembled a storm door built into the roof, and a few rows of LED tube lights going around the interior walls. It was someone's, probably Lyra's, passion project, and while unfinished, it certainly looked quite presentable. So it looks like you know some stuff about our world, huh? Asked Sophie as they began driving towards the hotel. The sisters were going to stay there as well, for one night at least, and the three of them, Usoko, Sophie, and Lyra, were going to spend the next day hanging out before the Pinkette and Elizabeth left for New Atlantis. You could say that, replied Usoko with a small laugh. Well, I don't know what I am, but when I use my crystal, I turn into a magical girl with wings. You have wings too? Cried Sophie with excitement, the crystal in her necklace flickering for a second as her arms briefly became green feathered wings. Quickly, she got it under control and was back to normal before anyone outside the van could have possibly noticed. Sorry, apologized Sophie. My crystal is pretty old, so if I get too excited, sometimes it shorts out. Elizabeth raised an eyebrow to that. Yes, what the girl said was technically true, but who would willingly use a crystal that old? Replacements, while not cheap, didn't cost too much. Or weren't supposed to. So, you might be dressed the part, but I'm guessing you and Usoko aren't really classmates, said Lyra to Elizabeth, who sat next to her, trying to make conversation while the kids chattered in the back. Is it that obvious? Laughed Elizabeth. No, we aren't. Truth be told, until recently, I was her mortal enemy. That's so, replied Lyra as they stopped at a red light. We talking, you slighted me once, prepare to die, or full-on, I'll gut you? The latter, muttered Elizabeth, and while we're not exactly friends, we do have a common goal, which is why we're working together. The light turned green, and Lyra began pulling onto the 405. They had a long drive ahead of them, as they had to stop at Francine's house to release Sarah before they could go to the hotel. So, judging by the fangs, I'm guessing you're a vampire? Asked Lyra, brushing some of her auburn hair out of her eyes. The red eyes are kind of a tell, too, if you don't mind me saying. Dampier, actually, responded Elizabeth a bit shortly. My father, may he burn in hell, was a vampire. Mother was a human. I care not to say more. My bad, winced Lyra. In the back seat, meanwhile, Usoko and Sophie continued to catch up as Usoko related everything that had happened since the past October, when Usoko first learned about the monster world. Wow! Said an absolutely awestruck Sophie. You actually fought a Yeti? And a Takuma? That's amazing! Takumas are supposed to be incredibly deadly, even for ogres and oni. It was pretty dark in the van, so the girls could only really see each other whenever Lyra passed under the streetlights, casting orange light upon their faces. Well, I couldn't have done it myself. I had my friends backing me up, replied Usoko. Nonami and Rei, Sarah, Hyoka, and of course Emiko. Yeah, BT dubs, congrats, smiled Sophie. I wish I could meet someone like that too. Maybe someday. Thanks, smiled Usoko softly. I know you will, Soph. Huh, speaking of, I wonder what Emmy's up to right now anyway. Half a world away, Emiko was busy scrubbing through the archives of Gardena, still trying to find any information on their assailant from the day before. Rei and Hitomi were currently asleep in the corner, Emiko's school jacket laying over them as best it could. Leaning against one another with clasped hands, as the red oni snored like a trumpet. Emmy had barely paused since she'd gotten here, and it was visible, etched onto her features clear as day. Her blue hair hung down in loose threads over her now sunken face. Big dark bags had formed under her violet eyes, as she'd taken her glasses off hours ago, and she was definitely paler. That must be something, she whispered, less out of a need to be silent, and more so because of how hoarse her voice had become. I just know there must be. Oh, damn it all. With a big sigh, she let her body go limp and fell to the floor, landing in a heap. I've searched every record here, every last book, video, article, scroll, or memory stone, and nothing at all on what a mystery attack it could be. It was at that moment Cecily, having just returned from lunch, walked by and noticed Emiko on the floor. Everything all right? She asked. Did a tornado go through here? Wow, it's messy. Miss Nakamoto, groaned Emiko. Good day. I don't suppose you know anything about the creature we briefly fought. She went on to describe it to Cess, who recoiled a bit, but otherwise did her best to listen. Nope, never heard anything like that, she said, perhaps a bit too quickly. Oh, but if anyone has, it'd be Kome Hayasaka. She knows all there is to know about ghosties and ghoulies. Emmy's brow furrowed. She'd heard that name somewhere before, but right now she couldn't quite recall. Who's that? She asked of her cat-girl boss. What was it Lydia said before? She began knocking on her skull, trying to jar the words out. Aha! The foremost authority on the spirit world, at least in Japan anyway. You want to know about this thing? Talk to her. That was it, Emiko thought. If anyone besides Nonami or Lydia might have a clue what they were dealing with, it was going to be Kome Hayasaka. Though human herself, Kome had been raised in a village on Hokkaido, far to the north. This particular village was unique in that, unlike in most of the rest of the world, monster kind and humankind lived together in harmony. Of course, the existence of said village was a secret from the human world for the most part. From a young age, Kome had been inquisitive about the denizens of the spirit realm, those ethereal beings who only partially exist within our own dimension. As such, on the day of her 18th birthday, she had set out on a long expedition to learn about, meet with, interview, and catalog as many different types of spirits as she could. Now nearly 80, her library on spirits was the most complete and thorough in the entirety of Eurasia, if not the whole world. Of course, she wouldn't just let anyone come in and poke around. Fortunately, Emiko wasn't just anyone. Being the Blue Oni princess came with many perks. With a light push on the shoulder, Emiko tried to wake Rei up. Hey, Kobayashi, up and at 'em, she whispered, to no avail. Plan B, then. There's cookies in the lobby. And up she sprang, scaring the life out of Hitomi, who, thinking they were under attack again, accidentally tased Rei in the back, causing the Oni to roar in pain. Emiko just sighed again and put her head in her hands. I wonder if Issa is dealing with this much chaos right now. Nonami, as it happened, was having some minor issues of her own, though nowhere near to the extent of Emiko's. Try as she might, the vampire could just not get comfortable inside her coffin. God, if I had $1 for every time that happened. I mean, what? Being that she was in her homeland once more, she didn't need the soil she was used to sleeping on back in Japan. That was turning out to be quite the problem, ironically enough. Though the padding and silk lining felt exquisite, she had grown accustomed to the coarse sensation on her bare skin, as the vampire tended to sleep nude, mostly to avoid having to constantly wash dirt out of her nightgowns. With a deep groan, she peeked the lid of her coffin open just enough to see if any sunlight was leaking into the room. Seeing there wasn't, she quickly got out, put on her yokai crystal, and Seeing there wasn't, she quickly got out and put on her yokai crystal before throwing on some clothes. Perhaps a good walk around the grounds would do her some good. It became quickly apparent that wouldn't be enough. So she decided to try something else. A walk down to the village below, the castle. some 3 miles away. With the quick addition of a choker to cover her very obvious scar, she was off. It had been there a very long time. It had been a very long time since she'd been there, and seeing how much it had changed on the carriage ride up had certainly shocked her. Hanselberg had started out as not more than 3 families moving to the area for its rich soil and good hunting, but had quickly grown into a decently sized hamlet as word had spread. It was there that Nonami had spent the first few years of her life when she'd assumed she was human, attending school and church services and playing with other children during the day. Nowadays, Hanselberg was practically unrecognizable. It had grown so much. The old church and several stone and wood buildings were all that remained of the old town, replaced with concrete and steel, glass and brick. Even so, being in the town again made her feel nostalgic. The castle might be her home, but this was her hometown. Coming up to the market district, she was pleasantly surprised to recognize several store names, kept in their respective families for generations, even if their exteriors had changed drastically. As she strolled the familiar cobblestone paths, she happened upon a clothier. In the window, Nonami saw several dresses and couldn't help an internal chuckle. It was as though she were staring at the perfect metaphor for her hometown, as the dresses, while clearly of an older style, were made from newer materials. Then she noticed something else. Another dress further back, black and lacy. It looked almost like a Victorian-era wedding dress. Then, like an arrow to the face, she felt a burning memory come back from her time in the Kaiju Island temple. She had told her teammates that she couldn't remember any of what had happened, but that had been a lie. She remembered every last detail, and now, seeing this dress, nearly identical to the one her dark self had worn, was like being struck with a physical blow. She teetered for a second before falling backwards onto the ground with a shout. Immediately, several people came up to check on her. "Miss, are you all right?" he asked, crouching down to speak to her. When he did so, Nonami noticed that his eyes were a shade of blue that almost matched her own. Peculiar. Yes, I think," she said, shaking her head to clear her thoughts. "Just had a moment of vertigo. Nothing more." The man's face, now that she could see it better, looked incredibly familiar. "Peter? Peter?" she whispered. The man seemed a bit surprised at hearing that name. "No, my name is Martin," he replied, "though my grandfather's name is Pieter. Do you know him by chance?" "You could say that," thought Nonami with a dry laugh. Pieter Anderson was a human who, nearly a century ago now, Nonami had fallen in love with. The two had met one night at a beer hall in the late 30s, not long after Nonami had lost her prior team. He had been an instrumental part of getting the vampire, who had gone by Maria von Stroop back on her feet. She had been drinking off her depression, even though she couldn't taste the beer itself. Very quickly, the two fell in love and purchased a house together in the village, though Nonami had to make up a reason for why they couldn't get married, albeit a flimsy one. Still, Pieter didn't mind and was just happy to be with her. When the 40s had rolled around, the two worked with the mayor in secret to keep the town free of the Nazis, beating the tar out of any who showed up. Eventually, once the 50s began, they had a child together, a daughter named Mirabelle. It was soon after she'd been born that Nonami decided to tell Pieter the truth. Pieter had already asked why their child had red eyes, something Nonami couldn't explain without telling the truth that she was a vampire masquerading as a human. She told him then and there, and if she had expected rage, or perhaps confusion, the only one confused was her when Pieter began laughing. So that's how you were able to lift that general's car and throw it into the lake. Oh yeah, I saw that. Eventually, though, Pieter began to grow old. Nonami had used some of her blood to prolong Pieter's life, but it could only do so much, and both of them knew it. He told her one day to go out, live her life, and not worry about this old man and his problems. Maria had, of course, protested vehemently, but Pieter wouldn't hear a word of it. Okay, just real quick, author's note, when it's the orange-haired character, I'm referring to her as Nonami. When she's not wearing the crystal, black hair, she's Maria. Just, anyway, probably should put that at the beginning. Oh, anyway. Maria, please hear me, he had said one day, the wind rustling his now gray hair. I'm an old man, and you have hardly aged a day since we met. I love you, and I always will. But I see now that I will never be able to be with you. My life, compared to yours, is a blink. I will be forever grateful for the time we shared together, and I will treasure these moments in my heart. But it is time, I think, for you to move on. Go, see the world like we had always wanted. You deserve it. And so, with a heavy heart, Maria had left. It was not but a few years later, when she began working for Gardner once more, she would be teamed up with Cecily and Lydia's mother, Elnie Nakamoto. Oh, no, Elnie. As well as a Dompier named Elisa. Though she might have been apart from him, deep in her heart, Nonami would never let go of her one true love. Yes, I have known your grandfather for many years, replied Nonami after a second or two. He and I are close friends, though it has been years since we last spoke. Is he still alive? Asked Martin in reply. Yes, though his health has admittedly dipped as of late, and no one is quite sure why. Are you sure we're talking about the same man? No offense, Miss... Von Stroop, replied Nonami. Maria von Stroop. Martin's eyes widened at that. Then you're... the woman from his stories. But how? Nonami winced. She had figured she should have picked a different name, but it was too late now. I will explain everything if you take me to see him, she whispered. May I ask one more question, though? Martin nodded. Your mother. Is her name Mirabelle? It was, yes, he responded solemnly, though she is no longer with us, sadly. Disease took her. It felt like someone had taken Nonami's guts and ripped them from her stomach. Like her heart had shattered into a billion tiny pieces. Mirabelle. She had missed so much of her own daughter's life. And now... I see, she said in a low, hollow tone, trying her best to fight back tears. My condolences. Martin nodded his thanks, though a part of him wondered how this mysterious woman knew his mother's name, or why she seemed so affected by news of her death. The walk to Pieter's home wasn't a long one, fortunately, as Nonami's legs were still a bit weak from her episode earlier. Martin had, half-jokingly, offered to carry her, but Nonami had declined. Now they were stood before a house the vampire had many times wondered if she'd ever see again. Her other home. I'll let him know you're here, said Martin, unlocking the door. "Not to be rude, but could you wait here? I am quite sorry." Speaking of sorry, gotta pause again. It is no problem," replied Nonami with a disarming smile. "I'm a stranger at your grandfather's house. You have every right to be leery. I don't blame you." With a head tilt of acknowledgement, Martin entered the old cobblestone house. Nonami, not normally one to feel anxiety, was actually finding herself swaying back and forth, like a schoolgirl waiting on the boy she crushed on. In a nearby yard, she could see children, perhaps no older than 10, playing with sticks, using them as swords. She couldn't help but smile wistfully. She'd missed so much of her own son, Claude's life, due to her work with Gardner, and had practically missed the entirety of her own daughters as well, and, it seemed, much of her own grandsons. Part of her, a small part perhaps, wished she could have a do-over on it all. The anticipation was almost becoming too much to bear now, and Nonami could feel her stomach doing somersaults. Part of her said she should just cut and run. This wasn't why she was here. She ignored those impulses. This trip was about returning home, and what better way could she do so than coming home? After what felt like an eternity, finally Martin returned to the door and motioned for her to come in. Following close, Nonami was able to glance at several photos of an auburn-haired, blue-eyed woman next to an older gentleman and a boy no older than 5 or 8 in some photos. The woman was Mirabelle. Nonami was certain. They looked so much alike. Approaching the room, Martin entered first to introduce her, and then Nonami entered after. Though he had aged much in the intervening years since they'd last met, Nonami instantly recognized those eyes, baby blue and full of sparkle. The rest of him was hardly recognizable as the same man she'd fallen in love with all those years ago. Wrinkled and gaunt now, old age hadn't been too kind to him. Though to be fair, he probably didn't look too bad for 102. "Pieter," she breathed. "Maria," he rasped through his oxygen mask. She went over and embraced him as well as she could, taking care not to move him. For the longest time, they simply stared into each other's faces, content to just be reunited once more. "So, you said you would explain how you're the woman from his stories," said Martin after a long while. He didn't want to be rude, but curiosity was getting the better of him. "Of course, Martin," sighed Nonami. "You're owed some answers." "Pieter, should you tell him, or should I?"
Tell him what? Laughed the old man wryly. That you're his grandmama? Or that you're a vampire?
I think that was probably my worst Master Roshi voice ever. Of all time. Martin looked completely taken aback by this statement, and understandably so. It isn't every day you find out the woman you were traveling with just moments prior is your immortal vampire granny. A simple flash of her fangs, though, showed Martin the truth on one of those things.
I'm sorry,
he sighed, head in his hands. "I'm just having a hard time coming to grips with all of this. Vampires are real? But how were you just outside?" "My yokai crystal," replied Nonami. "It keeps me in a mostly human form, though I retain the fangs and glowing eyes. They're probably a bit more noticeable in here, I'd imagine." Pieter coughed a little, reaching for a drawer on his nightstand. On instinct, Martin rushed over and pulled the drawer out.
Right. There's a picture in there.
Wait, no, that's...
There's a picture in there that'll explain everything,
he wheezed.
Close to the bottom. The frame I told you never to touch.
His voice Martin knew exactly what his grandfather meant by that and pulled out the aged metal picture frame, turning it over and gasping when he saw the picture. In it was a young Pieter, something he had seen before several times in other older photos. But in this photo was a young woman, leaned over his shoulder as the two looked down on a small child Pieter held in his arms. With the only difference being in her haircut, a long braid in the back and more in the style of the era, the woman was unmistakably Nonami. "This is," he stammered. "Then you are—" "It would seem so," nodded Nonami, motioning for Martin to hand her the photo. She'd seen it before, but it had been so long. Had she really worn her hair like that? And that dress, God, she looked like a barmaid. "Martin, could we have a moment alone?" asked Pieter. "I know you must have 1,000 questions, lad, but—" "No, it's quite all right," he sighed. "I think I need some time to wrap my head around this. One question, though, Miss Von Stroop." "Yes?" "Am I going to grow fangs or turn into a bat anytime soon now?" "Of course not," she smiled. All three of them shared a brief laugh at that before Martin headed back to the living room to think about everything that had just transpired, while his grandparents spent the next 5 hours catching up. For the first time in a long time, Nonami truly felt at home. Just want to try to explain the voice I was trying to do for Martin. I was trying to do a Sean Bean Martin Septim voice because he's named after Martin Septim. But anyway, moving on. See, you're not going to get this kind of stuff in the official audiobook that'll come out someday. All these little author's notes. Anyway, there was a click, followed by a sound not unlike an electrical zap, mixed with a sharp hiss. "Freedom!" screeched Sarah O'Malley, bursting through a gap in the doorway as Usoko unlocked and opened the door to her grandmother's house. "I was beginning to think I'd never get out." Everyone else had remained in the van while Usoko went up to the door. Neither of the Myers sisters felt they had any business there, while Elizabeth just didn't feel like getting out. As such, it was up to the Pinkette, guided by notes from her grandmother, to undo the sealing ward on the front door, the 3 magical booby traps on the knob, and avoid the runic minefield on the way up. Usoko was glad it didn't take too long. This type of magic, altering physical attributes and dispelling, was really not her forte. She much preferred just shooting fire at her problems. "I thought you just couldn't get into places uninvited, Sarah?" asked Usoko, kneeling down to pick up one of Francine's cats that had tried to escape, a russet and gray tabby named Velvet. "Aye, and that's true," replied Sarah with a sigh. "But your grandma, Usoko, she's got some powerful wards up around this place. Meant to keep spirits out, but it is just as good keeping them in. I love cats much as the next lass, but these little ones, little attention whores they are, would not leave me alone." Even despite that, Sarah couldn't help smiling at the little fuzzball in Usoko's arms. "Maybe they just like you, Sarah," smiled the Pinkette, scratching little Velvet under the chin. "You're a good person for the most part. A bit of a troublemaker, though." "Like you're one to talk, lass," grinned Sarah. "Anyway, it'll be good to get back. You got me ticket by chance?" "Of course," said Usoko as she began rustling through her purse. "Let me see here. Aha! Found it." She handed the ticket to Sarah, who immediately did a series of flips and twirls in the air while silently cheering so as to not draw attention. "Finally! Thank you, Usoko. You're an afterlife saver, you are." Usoko smiled, but motioned for Sarah to rein in before anyone noticed, to which the banshee obliged. After briefly entering the house to check on all of her grandma's cats, as well as taking out the 2-week-old trash in the bin, Usako relocked the door, put the wards back up the way she'd been instructed, and headed back to the van. "Before you leave town, Sarah," said Usako as she got in and buckled up, We're heading out for dinner at a place Sophie recommended. I know you don't need to eat, but want to come with?" Sarah seemed to mull it over for a moment before agreeing. Though when she caught sight of Elizabeth sitting in the front, she demanded an explanation, which she was promptly given by the Dompier. "I don't believe ya," said Sarah flatly as they started driving again. Not but a couple months ago, you wanted Usoko and Nonami dead, skinned alive, and mounted on your wall, not necessarily in that order. Now you've got this big old change of heart, 'cause what? The snake bitch is causing trouble? Nay, I don't believe it for a second, and neither should ye, Usoko." "First of all, you exaggerate," sighed Elizabeth in exhaustion. "I merely wanted, with an emphasis on the past tense here, so strong it could bend steel, to rip her limb from limb. This is something I no longer desire. Furthermore, I am the only one who can take her to who she needs to see. No one else knows they exist, or if they do, they don't know what the individual is capable of. The van hit a big pothole just as... Wrong person. The van hit a big pothole just as Usako was about to reply, and everyone was sent upwards for a second. Both sisters' eyes were square on Elizabeth after that, watching her like a hawk, especially Lyra. "Sorry, what was I going to say? Oh, right," the pinkette sighed. She knew Sarah was being protective of her, something Usako would normally have really appreciated. "Right, look, Sarah, while I can't vouch for everything she said, so far Mina hasn't been wrong yet. Not about anything in regards to this. I can't afford to not trust her right now. Not when my mom's life is on the line." Sophia glanced over at Usako. "I thought you told me your mom died, Usako," she asked. Well, sorta," replied Usako sheepishly. "It turns out it's a bit more complicated than that. Turns out I'm an angel, apparently." Lyra nearly skidded off the road then, the shock of what Usako said causing both girls to briefly change to their half-bird harpy modes. With wings instead of hands, Lyra had nothing to clutch the wheel with. Fortunately, Elizabeth was quick on the draw, stabilizing the van, and Lyra was able to very quickly regain control over herself, changing back before they could actually hit anything. "You're a what?" screeched the driver as her sister tried hard to change back, but was having a terrible time with it. "Didn't you say you didn't know what you were earlier?" "Well, that's what all the scientists and doctors back home seem to think anyway," explained Usako. "Honestly, I'm still skeptical myself, which is why I didn't mention it then, but if that's what the evidence says, then who am I to argue? The point is, if Mina is right, then this person she's taking me to can teach me how to bring my mom back. I truly can't afford not to do this." That explanation seemed to satisfy Lyra and Sophie for the time being, even if they didn't quite understand the situation fully. And they soon arrived at the restaurant they'd be eating at. Upon entering the place, Usako's eyes immediately went to the karaoke stage in the back right corner, and a grin stretched across her features. "Yeah, sis loves that thing," laughed Sophie as they were seated. "Can't hardly pull her away from it. You want to give it a try, Usako?" "Well, I guess it depends on what songs it has," replied Usako. "I don't know very many English songs. Not too many on the radio back home, you know. I know one or two that should be on there, though." Very quickly, the girls placed their orders. A huge pepperoni pizza, a Bloody Mary, and some bread. Once the waiter had left, the Pinkette immediately went over to check the catalog of songs. "Let me see here," she mumbled, thumbing through the list. "Nope, no, no. Oh, here we go." Making her way to the stage, she input the song of her choice, and seconds later, the opening guitar chords of John Denver's classic song, Country Roads, began drifting through the restaurant. Okay, just gonna preface this. I'm recording this at 10:50 p.m. and my singing voice is not what it normally is. So, apologies for the flatness. Almost heaven, West Virginia. If anyone present doubted if Usoko were an angel, 1 second listening to her singing voice would have convinced them otherwise. Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah River. As Usoko and company enjoyed themselves in America, Emiko was at the same time in full panic mode. Another author's note. As this scene is going on, imagine Usoko is still singing Country Roads. You can't obviously do that with a book, so yeah. Emiko, not but 10 minutes ago, she'd received a call that the small apartment she rented during the school months had caught on fire, the blaze quickly spreading to the entire building. With large flames licking the air, the structure in a roaring blaze, Emiko burst through her door as her regenerative abilities healed her faster than the flames could harm her. If this whole place went down, she could accept that, as fortunately she was the only tenant. There was little here that was irreplaceable to her, that is except for 2 things in her bedroom. A stuffed turtle Usoko had given her as a child, and a photo album of the 2 of them over the years. As long as those were safe, Emiko could rest easily. "Rah! Come on, where is it?" she roared, having found the slightly singed turtle easily enough on her bed. The album, though, was causing more trouble. Last she checked, Emiko had stored it away in the closet, but now she couldn't find hide nor hair of it. Thinking ahead, she'd already made sure to throw as many of her important belongings, clothes and other less important trinkets as she could in a bag, but she just couldn't bear to leave that album behind. "Where? Oh, come on! Please, Trolloc, help me!" Something shifted in the room, some rubble falling, and then Emiko spotted it. Burning but intact, without a care for her own safety, Emiko held it tight to her, transforming to Shutendoji and using her body's mass to smother the flames before changing back, illusioning up some new clothes, as the ones she'd worn in had long since burned away. Grabbing her bag and bursting back out the door just as the fire department arrived. Thinking fast, Emmy added some singeing to her human disguise and her fake clothes, so she'd look more authentic in case she were questioned. That said, she was just grateful to have been able to save the majority of her most valuable possessions she'd kept here. It was odd, though. How had the apartment caught fire? Certainly not from anything she'd left out by mistake. She owned no candles. Not even an oven as a microwave was all she required for cooking. An electrical short? Maybe. But it seemed unlikely. The apartment complex was quite new and certainly up to code. Then she saw it, shambling into the tree line behind her building, dropping a jerry can as it did. It took one look back at the Oni, an evil grin on its rotting, decayed face, before shuffling out of sight. The creature she and Ray had encountered, had it done this? But why? Why was it targeting her specifically? Emiko knew she had to get to the bottom of this, and fast, before anyone else was hurt by this thing. Take me home, country roads. As the song ended, nearly the entire restaurant gave a standing ovation, applauding her incredible singing voice. Usoko, for her part, just smiled, blushed, and bowed as the next song came on automatically. "Oh shit!" she mumbled excitedly before beginning the lyrics she knew too well from an ancient internet meme. And so I cry sometimes when I'm lying in bed. Oh, she's quite a natural, laughed Sarah. I never knew Usoko had it in her. She'd hit the first chorus now and motioned for Sophie to join her, the blonde harpy doing just that. Annie tries, Annie tries. Oh my God, do I try? Yeah, she was in a few school concerts with Sophie back in the day. Even then, the kid was something of a musical prodigy. It's a shame she never pursued it. In the excitement, Usoko turned the mic to Elizabeth, who, surprisingly enough, supplied the next lyric, albeit in a bored tone, rolling her eyes. And he prays, adding an unimpressed no when the mic turned on her once more for a meow. Though Usoko didn't miss a beat, finishing the line, for revolution, and I say, hey. Can you tell I had fun writing this part? That's so, inquired Sarah. If you don't mind me asking, did you happen to know their father? What was he like? Huh? Oh, Mr. Roland was, well, he was an odd one, replied Lyra warily. Never really seemed to fit in anywhere. Didn't seem the type to up and leave his family the way he did, that's for sure. Why do you ask? Oh, no particular reason, really, sighed Sarah. Let's just say his mother and I go back a ways and leave it there for now. The banshee glanced over her shoulder, where all three girls were now well into the song. Learn how to hide your feelings. The hell are they singing? She asked in genuine confusion. I have no idea, replied Lyra, face-palming. As the song ended, Usoko, Sophie, and Elizabeth came back to the table, all giggles. By the time they'd reached the end, even the Dompier had been singing along. Her keen hearing had picked up on Sarah's question, and knowing it was a subject she'd kept up to date on, offered to share what she knew of the Pinkettes' absent father. So, you knew my father? Asked Usoko, who was admittedly curious about the man, despite more or less hating his guts. Was he always a jerk, or was this something new? Your father was, how should I put this? Elizabeth tapped her chin ponderously. He's been searching for something. A relic, I believe. Even I am unsure of the specifics, But? Usoko was feeling a little incredulous. Her father had abandoned his family for some dusty old trinket? It had better damn well been important. Well, again, this is only unconfirmed information, but... Her voice went hushed as she finished her sentence. All signs indicate he is searching for the Lance of Longinus, quite possibly the only weapon that can kill Aramanus. Usoko was silent for a moment before bursting into contained laughter, her face turning bright vermilion. Lance of Longinus? She practically shouted in laughter. I thought that big old fork was just something they made up for Evangelion. She paused. No, don't tell me. Get in the bloody robot, Usoko, grinned Sarah. Allowing the two a moment of giggles, Elizabeth finally interrupted their fun with a sharp cough. The Lance of Longinus is very real. And no, it's not a mecha-sized fork spear. It is the weapon used to pierce the side of Christ in biblical times. A legendary weapon of great power. Well, more specifically, that is simply where its name came from. The spear is old. Ancient doesn't do it enough justice, to be honest. They say it changes its form to best suit its wielder. Suffice to say, it is a well-documented god-slayer. Thus why it is said to be the only thing that could truly kill Aramanus. She paused to give Usoko a chance to absorb that information before continuing. The only ones who can wield it are angels, or those descended from them. In other words, Usoko, you. You and perhaps that sister of yours, though the thought of her fighting anything larger than a moth makes me laugh. Usako's expression twisted into anger. Hey, don't you badmouth my sister, she warned. Whatever, fine, sorry, apologized Elizabeth in a half-assed way. But regardless, Usako, you will need to find the lance if you ever want to have any hope of defeating him. You say that like Aramanas is on the loose, Mina, laughed Lyra. Come on, he's a myth. A scary story parents tell to their kids when they're acting up. A boogeyman. The look on all three girls' faces told Lyra everything she needed to know. Or perhaps didn't. What else are you not telling us? Classified things, mostly, sighed Elizabeth as dinner arrived. Ah, but the food's here, so perhaps this is not the best time. The conversation on hold for the time being, the girls began digging into the massive pepperoni pizza before them, savoring every juicy slice, and with Usako accidentally burning her lip on some still molten cheese, based on a true story. When they had finished, Elizabeth headed back to the karaoke machine, flipping through the booklet to see if they had a certain song she actually felt like singing. Wow, they actually had it, huh? All right. She had no choice, it seemed. She had to wow them with her skills. The harmonies of a marimba began wafting through the restaurant. And now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. In Germany, meanwhile, Nonami, having said what she knew this time were her final goodbyes to Pieter, was making her way back to the castle. Now thoroughly drained of energy, though in the best way she could imagine, she could not wait to feel the lining of her coffin once more. However, something felt off. A stranger had been tailing her since she'd passed the bakery near the edge of town 10 minutes ago. She'd been pretending not to notice him, in case he was just a genuine hiker out on a walk, but no, this felt different. May I help you? She asked, not pausing her stride even a little. I should warn you, if such is your intention, that attacking me can and will prove fatal. The man laughed, removing his wide-brimmed hat to reveal a face that quite resembled Nonami's father, only lacking the facial hair and with dark red locks of hair. Aunt Maria, we finally meet, he said, raising his hands disarmingly. Is my mother well? Mother. Nonami stopped in her tracks. Aunt Maria? Only Usoko called her that. Francine Roland is my mother, he explained. My name is Charles, and I have much to discuss with you, my dear aunt. About my daughter. You are... The vampire's eyes narrowed, and she approached the man who claimed to be her nephew, appraising him for a moment before striking him across the face. I probably deserve that, he admitted. You abandoned your family, my great-nieces, left Usoko's mother a single parent, and caused them so much grief that I am sure I only know the basics of. You deserve far more than that, but for now I will allow you to continue speaking. Thank you, he replied, rubbing his now red cheek, but the things I have to say are best said indoors, away from prying ears, so to speak. Boy, we are in a field, stated Nonami firmly. Who is going to hear? The sheep? The mice? Charles went to raise a hand in protest before lowering it after a second thought. Point, he said awkwardly. Very well. Take a seat, won't you? I'm sure you're tired. With a flick of his wrist, Charles manifested the folding chair from thin air, setting it down for Nonami to sit upon. Magic, she said, not asked Nonami. That's right, you're over us, aren't you? How is it that Aramanas has not tried to control you, as he has Usoko? Oh, he has, but he can't, the man said wryly, reaching into his pocket and pulling out an ancient bone. One of the ribs of St. Paul. Holy relics keep him away, so I keep plenty on me. Now, as for what I'm here to discuss, he manifested another chair, sitting across from Nonami, crossing one leg in front of the other. Simply put, Usoko is both in danger and is a danger to us all. Nonami sighed, stood up, and took 2 steps away. If you're not going to take this seriously, I'm going to leave. I assure you, replied Charles firmly. I am not joking in any matter. We may be estranged, but Usoko is still my daughter, and I only want what is best for her. Nonami considered his words for a moment. He may have had a point in his last statement, but she could not find herself able to conceive of any possible future where Usoko could be responsible for any massive disaster. Even still, she supposed she could at least humor the man, and on the off chance he was correct, she couldn't afford to And on the off chance he was correct, she couldn't afford not to hear him out. After all, as a vampire, time was the one commodity she had plenty of. Very well, she sighed, sitting back down. I will hear what you have to say. For now. This is going a little longer. We're at the 1 1/4 hour point. Yeah, I need to go. Yeah, but we're close to a good stopping point, so I'm just gonna go ahead and... Yeah. Wow, that was fantastic, smiled Usoko as the group got back in the van. And I don't just mean the food either. Mina, you have an incredible singing voice. The Dampier sighed, rolling her eyes, though nothing she could do could keep the slight blush off her cheeks. She wasn't used to receiving compliments, and Usoko's cheery nature made it feel all the more degrading. Yet a small part of her, the flickers of her old self, smiled internally. Yes, well, thank you, I suppose, she replied curtly before turning to Lyra. There's something that's been on my mind, though. A nagging thought. Lyra, earlier your sister mentioned her yokai crystal being on the fritz, and not long after, their malfunction nearly sent us off the road. Why have you not gotten them replaced by now? Lyra let out a laugh, a short and almost bitter laugh. You're joking, right? She asked as they pulled out of the parking lot. Those aren't exactly cheap, Mina. A new yokai crystal costs $2 grand. For us, that's more money than we see in 3 months. If it's between a fritzing crystal or literally eating, well... Elizabeth couldn't help the shocked expression on her face, as she'd been absolutely stunned by Lyra's statement. While she might not have agreed with the concept of them, preferring to live as herself with maybe the occasional slight alteration, not every race had the luxury, especially ones like harpies. They were necessary for some races to live amongst humans, and in their society. Yokai crystals could give them arms or hands, legs, or covered up large chunks of their bodies that wouldn't fit in, like the lower half of an arachne, or an Oni's massive bulk. No one quite understood how the crystals worked, just that they did, and they were likely magic. For as long as Elizabeth had known, they were always all but free to replace, so long as you could prove yours was broken or malfunctioning. Either that rule had changed, or someone in a higher-up position was running a scam. Or maybe both. Elizabeth didn't like it one bit. Look, Elizabeth sighed. What the hell was she about to do? Had that pink-haired whelp rubbed off on her already? Or was it something else? I don't really use mine anymore. I'm a Dampier, so I pretty well blend in as it is. Let me just... She focused on the crystal for a second, and Usoko saw its color turn from goldish to clear, like the one Ray had given her that first night. There we go. Debonded. She handed the gem to Sophie, who excitedly removed hers, briefly assuming her harpy form for all present to see, before putting the new one on and changing back to normal. "Wow! Thank you so much, Mina!" she cheered, tears flecking her eyes. "You're so nice! Gosh, how can I ever repay you?" "It was nothing," sighed Elizabeth in embarrassment as the van pulled into the driveway of the hotel and into a parking spot. "All right, everyone out," ordered Lyra. "I'll get us checked in and then maybe we can go for a quick swim before bed. Come on, get." Usoko, having watched the whole thing, now had several questions for Elizabeth. When the Pinkette had gotten her crystal, Lydia told her that though they could debond it from her, she'd lose any memories associated with it. Yet Elizabeth seemed fine now? "Oh, that's... Well, if you'd been human to start with, then yes, you would have lost those memories. As it is, you aren't. So even if you did someday debond, you'd probably be fine. Well, probably. Well, either you'd be fine, or there's a chance you could be rendered catatonic for the rest of your life. I don't know. Your biology both confuses and quite honestly frightens me. You're like matter and antimatter coexisting." Before long, they had made it to their rooms. Though as they had gotten on the elevator, a familiar-looking young girl with black hair rushed towards them, dragging a large chest. "Wait! Please wait!" she cried, and Usoko held her arm out to stop the elevator door. "I'm so sorry," she gasped once aboard. "Thank you for holding it, ma'am." "Well, yeah, of course," smiled Usoko. "Hey, do I know you? I swear we've met before." "Nope, don't think so," she stammered as the elevator stopped on the 4th floor. "Oh, well, what do you know? Here's my stop. Thanks again. Bye!" She practically charged out of the elevator, dragging the chest with her. What a weirdo, thought the pink cat. It happened faster than it felt. One moment, Emiko was walking to Gardena in order to consult Cecily on the final preparations for her trip to Hokome Hayasaka, when suddenly she was sideswiped by the creature that was pursuing her, thrown into a nearby alley, crashing into the dumpsters. The sheer shock of it had Emmy reeling. Her body mass, combined with the force she'd been thrown, had actually left an Oni-shaped dent in the steel dumpster, and before she could move, it was on her, its fist pummeling her in the face and torso. Fleetingly, Emiko wondered how something so seemingly frail and cadaverous could have such power before, as suddenly as it started, the beating stopped. There was the sound of an impact on the thing's mushy flesh, a brief chemical-like hissing sound, followed by the creature roaring in pain and fleeing down the alley, scaling a building before vanishing into mist once again. A few seconds after that, a new girl approached Emiko. One she'd never seen before, but looked so familiar for reasons she couldn't explain. The girl wore all black, from denim shorts to t-shirt to her assault vest. She looked every bit the sharpshooter the sniper rifle on her back implied her to be. Aside from that, she had shoulder-length blue hair, dark azure eyes, and wore a stoic, almost haunted expression, the kind you see on those who have lived through war. "Emiko Ayame, are you all right?" she asked. "Can you stand?" I think so," groaned Emmy. Even with her regeneration powers, she was definitely going to feel that for the rest of the day. "Did you..." Her words trailed off as she got a better look at her rescuer's face. It could well be the mild concussion she was definitely suffering from, but to Emiko, this girl looked almost identical to Usoko, save for the hair. "I did," replied the girl, or Blusoko, as Emiko temporarily dubbed her. "That wasn't supposed to happen, not as it did, so I had to step in. Come, let's get you inside." She motioned for Emiko to follow, and the brunette did so. What did she mean by that? wasn't supposed to happen, not as it did? This girl was weird. Definitely weird. Who are you? Asked Emiko. Megami Toriyama. I'm the 5th member of Cryptid Ranger, Blue, and I chose to come here after my teammates left. She sighed, blushing softly. Mostly to meet you, Ayame Hime. I, too, am a Blue Oni. Well, half Blue Oni, anyway. I see, replied Emiko. Thank you again for the save, Toriyama-san. Half Blue Oni? Though Emiko was grateful for the rescue, she was finding herself quite suspicious of the girl now. Half Onis, while they theoretically could exist, as Onis and humans were biologically compatible, they were so rare as to be almost non-existent. Regardless of if that was true or not, Emiko was certain Megami was hiding something from her. The Oni could tell just by looking at her. Something about her body language just didn't sit right with Emiko. Upon entering, they were greeted by a familiar face Emiko hadn't seen in days. Hyoka! Emiko! Cried the Yukiona upon seeing her friend's bruised face. Oh my god! What happened? Are you okay? Yes, groaned Emiko. Megami here is taking me to the doctors. Not that I think I need them. I was, attacked by something. A strange, spirit-like creature. A thought crossed Emiko's mind. Say, Hyoka, I plan to visit someone up north who is very knowledgeable about spirits. I'm hoping she can help me with this situation. Would you like to come with me? You can bring Junji as well, if you like. The village is friendly to both humans and monsters. Perhaps you can learn more about Yukionas. The spectral girl contemplated for a moment. She definitely wanted to know more about herself. If her situation was unique, or if there was a precedent. Even if not, the northern island would be a nice vacation for her and her fiancé. Hyoka knew she could trust Gohan to watch the house. After all, the Yeti had been living on that mountain for decades before she arrived. I would actually. Kind of. Like that, yeah, smiled Hyoka. But first, let's get you better, okay? Yes, saluted Emiko weakly. As they made their way to the infirmary, Emiko saw Rei and her human friend coming the opposite way down the hall. The Red Oni had a worried look on her face that only grew more so when she saw the state her counterpart was in. Emichi! She yelped. Are you alright? It was like the thing, wasn't it? Oh, excuse me. Emiko sighed, nodding, her pride more wounded than her body. It got the jump on me, the damn bastard, she groaned. Fortunately, I should be fine. No broken bones, though the regeneration's taking longer than usual. Mind me asking where you two are heading? Out of town, replied Rei, more at ease, knowing Emiko wasn't hurt too badly. It, attacked Hitomi earlier. Probably because she tased it before. I regret nothing, cried Hitomi. Right, you, clearly got put on its shit list. You're so incredibly lucky I was close by and managed to wrestle it away. Rei's eyes began swelling with tears. Gods, I don't even want to, think about what could have happened. Hitomi squeezed a little closer to Rei, taking her hand. Coulda, but didn't because of you, Reichi. You, saved me. Megami sighed loudly, pulling on Emiko, trying to indicate they needed to move on. Though she didn't appreciate the other Oni's lack of decorum, Emiko knew she had a point. One moment, then we can continue, she said to her, swapping back to Rei. Where are you going, if I may ask? I can see about sending some of my family's gods with you, if you want. Rei grinned from ear to ear, knowingly. I don't think they'd, be too well received in my father's village, Emmy. But I appreciate the village. No, with, that many Oni around, I don't think even our new friend would dare risk trying something. Besides, I think she's, way more interested in you. Boy, did Rei have that right, thought Emmy. The two Oni exchanged a brief hug before parting ways, Megami rolling her eyes. What if something's wrong internally, Ayame? Asked Megami as they began walking again. You could have internal injuries you don't know about. You could die. I highly doubt that, remarked Emiko. Though I don't quite understand why you're so concerned with my well-being. Well, it's appreciated. I am fully capable of taking care of myself, Toriyama-san. Please do not think so poorly of me. The shorter brunette winced, freezing in her tracks. I apologize, she replied, cheeks tinged red in embarrassment from the chastising Emiko had given her. It seemed to take her a moment to collect herself. With all due respect, however, you are my princess. How can I not be concerned for your health? Were you to die on my watch, I would be an embarrassment to my entire race. That made enough sense to Emiko, who decided to let it go. Odd. When she said as much, it seemed as if the girl was relieved. Oh, no matter. Emiko had bigger fish to fry. She was going to use this time to plan her trip north, to the town of Nazunoyuki. There, hopefully, she would be able to get help from Kome Hayasaka. Because if Kome Hayasaka couldn't help her, no one could. And right at the 1 hour, well, about at the 1.5 hour mark, that's where we're going to stop for this one. That's more or less the first half of book 4. I hope you enjoyed. Yeah, sorry if my readings were a little meh than last time, and sorry for the, I don't want to call it subpar, but yeah, it was kind of subpar singing. Like I said, it's late, and my throat's been trying to close up this whole time I've been reading. I'm not even, not even joking. I had to pause the recording several times while we were doing this, just to take a drink or just hack along. Oh, but anyway, like I said, I don't know when this is going up. You'll know, because you'll be watching it, listening to it. But I don't. You know more than I do right now. I'm loopy. Alright, you know what? I'm just going to outro before I just start rambling for another 10 minutes. Because that could happen. Hope you enjoyed. See you in the next one. Don't know when it'll be. Good night. Take care. Rest well. And, sayonara.